joining me from London is broadcaster and author Esther Krakue. Esther, this is so tragic, you know, like the UN's been very deliberately spreading fear among children for many years now. For instance, in this film it made ahead of its Copenhagen Climate Summit, suggesting not even your child's teddy bear is going to be safe from global warming. You know, it'll either die in a crack in the ground from the drought or be flooded with the rising seas. It all seems so irresponsible.
Oh, absolutely. And the reality is, you know, young children particularly are susceptible to this kind of doomsday apocalyptic predictions. I mean, the story about Theo Ferreras, while it is an isolated incident, and, you know, his sister did mention that the pandemic played a role in heightening his anxiety. The reality is young children these days are being scared into genuinely believing that the world is going to cease to exist in 100 years. But the thing is, the worrying thing is the entirety of the story that's being told. It's not just, you know, the world is going to vanish if we don't do something. The solution at the end of what they posit is the most worrying part. So the world is going to end in, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever the latest statistics are saying, if we don't do this. And what this is basically giving up unfettered control to extra governmental organizations and just governments around the world. So now, somehow, the answer to tackling climate change is green taxes all over the place. I don't know anyone that's ever thought, oh my gosh, my taxes have increased and I'm really going, you know, taking the next step towards fighting climate change. I don't know why the solution has to be to fight climate change, you must give the government more of your money. And that's the entirety of the story that's being told. And I really don't understand why we're not talking about this in more detail, other than the utterances of a Swedish teenager. The reality is we should be very concerned that the automatic solution to actually tackling climate change in the ways that they say we should is to give the government more of our money.
Yeah, and I know Britain's got nuclear power stations, but this really gets me too. There is a solution if you really believe that you've got to cut your emissions, and that's nuclear power. Now, we've banned it in Australia, and Germany is now shutting down its last 3 nuclear power stations, even though they produce zero emissions, and Germany is short of energy. Elon Musk, who's the world's richest man, he is amazed. There he is.
I want to be super clear. In my opinion, Germany should not only not shut down the nuclear power plants, it should reopen the ones that shut down. Listen, playtime is over, okay? Obviously, playtime is over. This is a national security, it's a national security risk to shut these things down. I think people don't understand, like, you know, the coal power plants, because of their emissions, they cause a certain number of deaths every year, far more dangerous than nuclear power plants.
Now, what is the superstition about nuclear power?
I mean, the issue with nuclear power has always been a contentious one, particularly in Germany. And the reality is that the last 2 nuclear power stations that have been decommissioned, they were agreed to be decommissioned over a decade ago. So the matter of just switching it back on was always going to be complicated. But I think the most worrying aspect is what is going to replace it. You know, a lot of the eco-activists and the lobbyists really don't understand that there has to be a transition into something. Here in the UK, we've not managed to have any of those conversations or any foresight in our energy policy, which has been very evident from the last winter and our energy crisis, because we just don't know what to replace it, and everyone keeps bickering about it. The reality is, particularly in the developed world like France, which is a pioneer of nuclear energy, if it's managed properly and if it's done safely, it's actually the best and most reliable form of energy. And the ironic thing is, now that Germany has decommissioned its 2 nuclear power plants, they're going to rely more heavily on fossil fuels like coal. So it's actually been counterproductive in the way that the eco-activists want to. But the reality is we've been really stagnated in any kind of productive conversations we need to have over energy policy in the West and this transition to sort of net zero, because we can't agree on what to do.
Yeah, but Esther, meanwhile, before I run out of time, what is it with your courts? Now, you've got a 23-year-old anarchist. He threw 5 eggs at King Charles last year, shouted that Charles was a pedophile, and outside court last week, he said he wasn't sorry at all. Here he is.
I hope that it sparks conversation, and I hope that the conversation continues going forward. I'm going to continue advocating for a democratic confederation of the British Isles, rejecting not just the monarchy, but parliamentary rule altogether, and moving to a system of direct democracy where people make decisions that affect their own lives. And so if that's what I had to do to get this platform where you're all stood about me, then, you know, yeah, worth it.
Well, would he regret it? He gets the chance to give his little speech outside court, not jailed at all. In fact, he was sentenced only to a 12-month community order with 100 hours of unpaid work, which I presume includes giving TV interviews, plus about $1,000 in court costs. That's not a deterrent, Esther, is it?
Well, it's not a deterrent. I will say that it's actually a miracle that he was even apprehended in the first place, given the state of current British policing. But the reality is you're always going to have these young radicals, and I emphasize the word young because this person just looks like he just got out of daycare. Because they believe that their cause is so important that they must assault people and do really disruptive things to try and get their message out there. But the reality is it always backfires. I do wish policing was more tough. I do wish he saw some jail time, but our jails are so overcrowded that I don't see that happening.
Oh, well, they didn't say, well, why don't you reinvent hulks like the Australian convicts used to have? I mean, seriously, you can't have the king too scared to meet the people in public because some idiot now can throw eggs at him and get to hold a press conference afterwards.
Yes, I mean, it's completely ridiculous. It's not a deterrent at all. And it shows a complete lack of not just, respect for the monarch, but also the public at large. He could have thrown eggs at anyone and he still wouldn't have gotten any jail time. So it's really disappointing. But again, this is, an isolated incident with a crazy person, and we hope that it doesn't happen again.
Esther Krakue, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for your time.